This is GamesAtWork.biz, your weekly podcast about gaming, technology, and play. Your hosts are Michael Martin, Andy Piper, and Michael Rowe. The thoughts and opinions on this podcast are those of the hosts and guests alone and are not the opinions of any organization which they have been, are, or may be affiliated with.
This is episode 551, ATProto Socials. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another edition of GamesAtWork.biz. This is Michael Martin, one of your three co-hosts, joined by two other co-hosts here, and we're having a bit of an abbreviated show, but we have some fun things to chat about. Michael, let me kick over to you. How are you today?
I am just doing peachy keen, wonderful, fine, and I'm going to just pop it right over to Andy because, abbreviated. Andy, how are you?
I'm good. I feel like I started talking in our pre-show section, and thus we are abbreviated because I was showing you things that
this is
during the week.
These are things I've never encountered before. It's so cool.
Okay,
we could have hit record earlier, but unfortunately, you listening audience, that we talk about some secret things and we can't share every last one of our details. So Andy, start us off with this AT protocol. ATProto.com website. What happens here? What goes on? And
so you know Blue Sky, right? You guys are both on Blue Sky. Yeah. I'm on Blue Sky. Yep. So this thing, Blue Sky, is built on a protocol called ATProto. So that's their alternative, if you like, to ActivityPub. ActivityPub is a standard that is managed by the W3C, the World Wide Web Standards Body. ATProto is not currently managed by anyone other than Blue Sky PVC, but it will be they're in process of giving it to the IETF as a management organization to look after it independently. So it's a social protocol, but it's fundamentally different to ActivityPub because ActivityPub is all about apps that publish and subscribe data between them and let you see that in your own apps wherever they may be. But ATProto has a concept of every individual having what they call a PDS, a personal data store. The majority of PDSs right now are somewhere in the United States, owned by, or in data centers owned and operated by Blue Sky PVC, the organization behind the Blue Sky network. But I, in the last 6 months, moved my bit of my data from there to another system called Eurosky, which is hosted in Europe. The other interesting thing about this is that because you have a singular data set that for all of your social apps, you can attach your own unique name to it. So rather than on Mastodon and PixelFed and on WordPress and on other sites that use the ActivityPub protocol, I have multiple identities that are all me. On ATProto, you have a single identity and a single data store, and all of those other apps then hook into the data store from different angles. But I can have that singular identity. So what they do is they say, well, why don't you just make it your domain? So a lot of people have, let's say, Games at Work. .bluesky.social or whatever you might choose when you first sign up, but you can actually tie it if you have a domain to your domain name using DNS. So I have andypiper.me, which is my main Blue Sky account. I also have another one, which is andypiper.org, which is the mirror of my Mastodon account. I own both of those domains. I've been able to do some twiddling to point the domains and bind them to my identities on the ATProto network. So the reason I'm talking about this is not because I'm about to go and work for Blue Sky, but I've been obviously following this space for a long time. And one of the interesting things that came up this week was that Eurosky launched a new portal that lets you more easily identify which apps you can use your data in, or your identity in. Mm-hmm. And secondly, I had an email from a friend of mine who I follow her newsletter, Salma Alam-Naylor, and she mentioned another site that we'll talk about in a moment as part of this. So they all kind of got me looking around to see what else there was that I hadn't paid attention to in the ATProto space. Any questions before I start talking more? Be the audience for me.
So I get the technology, and obviously we're in early days of what they're trying to do here, etc. I'm just wondering what you envision the average non-techie user would see in this.
Well, so the average non-techie user right now sees...
Because the setup sounds pretty horrendous.
Horrendous?
Yeah.
Okay.
Linking domain names and DNS
I see.
records.
Right. Okay, yeah. So it is a little technical to do those things that I just mentioned.
A little.
That could be made easier. But what the average user, to answer your point, the average user right now sees an alternative to Twitter that looks, called Blue Sky, that looks a bit like Twitter, that lets you follow your friends and people you're interested in and share links, right? So that's what the majority of people using this system see. But then you can start to see a bunch of other apps that let you, but like you used to be able to do in the day with sign in with Twitter, sign in with Google, sign in with whatever, sign in, and then anything you do with that extra app all ends up in the same data store. And in theory, that data store could be hosted by you. Now, in principle, very few people host their own PDSs. They host them with other things, with organizations that can look after that data. But you could imagine anything you do related to coding or your career, job, your blogs, your events you go to, meetup sites, that could all end up in that same data store. So the average user would just see the ability to sign in with a single ID, which is their ID, that could be as bound to them as they want it to be. It could just be their username .bluesky.social, or it could be their domain. And that would be a singular login for any of those apps. And every time they use that, then they're enhancing that data set. Now,
so one of the things you mentioned before we started, because, again, I get the technical thing, is you mentioned something that I was not really aware of, is that anything you do on Blue Sky is public, period.
Yeah.
And so if you are connecting all your other sites with this Blue Sky ID, does that mean all that other stuff becomes public too?
So, yes, but... So ATProto is public by design, and right now they have some ideas about how to do things like private data and private sharing, but right now it's all public, absolutely. So as we will see as we talk about this in a bit more in a second, if you know, and it's complicated to get from Michael Rowe's Blue Sky username is this to, and here is all of his public data, because it's in a munge technical format. But people can go and find what they call the DID, which is the domain identifier that's bound to your PDS, and then they could go and look through the data that's there, and it would be your Blue Sky posts. But it would also be who you're following on Blue Sky and who you've blocked on Blue Sky, which most social networks haven't made public. Now, when Musk bought Twitter, he made people's blocks public, I believe, and their mutes public, I believe, because he thought that should be public, and that was something that we didn't. Blocks were public at Twitter, but mutes were not public. Anywho, there's a bunch of things definitely to be aware of, and I think until they figure out what they're going to do around the privacy element, then you might want to be careful about what you're doing. What I did this week, I'd already tried this with a couple of other apps in the past. So there's one called Smoke Signals, which is like an events, like a meetup.com type thing. So I'd gone to a Blue Sky event actually in London a couple of years ago, and that was they used Smoke Signals as the calendaring app for that. So there was that. There's another one called Leaflet, which is kind of a blogging and newsletter platform, similar to Button Down or Substack. But I found through this Eurosky portal of apps, which is kind of like a tile-based kind of website where you see the different types and categories of apps, and also through Salma's mailing newsletter, that there were a couple of things that I thought would be interesting to our audience. Now, I'll come on to those two in a second. The one I hit on first, though, because I'm in a job hunting mode, and I'm not in love with LinkedIn, was another one which is relatively new called Sifa, SIFA.id, where The promise is you sign in, it will let you already find who's in your network from Blue Sky, who's on that site, and it will also let you import your LinkedIn data. Now, LinkedIn has a ton of personal information. It also has a ton of personal information about your contacts. So it has email addresses and phone numbers, and you can set on LinkedIn the privacy to which you advertise your that information, that contact information, to your network. And I think the majority of mine is either just to my contacts or not at all advertised. But when you download your data from LinkedIn, you get a load of CSV files which contain all of that information. So you don't want to upload that to Cifa. But what you might want to upload to save time is your career history and a few other things. So I've done that. I've got a Cifa profile and it looks okay. I think it's quite nice. And it also pulls in at the top of the page the other ATProto networks you're using, other ATProto apps you're using, so people can see that I've posted on this website called Tangled, which is a GitHub type thing. There's another website called Pop something. Popfeed, thank you, which is kind of, I don't know, an IMDb or something similar, I suppose. So that was kind of fun and interesting, and that was kind of like what an alternative professional profile might look like if I wasn't so wedded to LinkedIn, because LinkedIn has just become largely trash, in my opinion. It's been infected by all of the same old, attention-seeking, must keep people here. So they've got games in there. They've got, algorithms that are not particularly helpful to actually finding a job. They are just helpful to shoving stuff in front of you. So I'm not a fan of that. But there's another app called Anisota, which kind of hooked me in because it was Enter the Dark Forest was the kind of the tagline for it, and it's a collectible card game or based on essentially your ATProto data. So you will see cards that are Blue Sky posts, and you can act on them, so you can like them and whatever, or you can there's achievements and all kinds of things, but you don't see the standard Blue Sky feed interface. You see a card-based interface where you can shuffle through your cards, which is, I think, quite interesting. And it's got a load of kind of RPG-ish kind of elements to it, which was quite fun from a gaming podcast perspective, gamification of all of this stuff, and just playing around with it. The one that really got me thinking about this whole idea of having this singular social data store is this thing called Etheros. So Ether, AETHEROS .computer, Etheros.computer. You sign in with your ATProto handle, and you get this kind of desktop in the web browser, and you get a little, apps bar across the bottom with a bunch of things on it that you can start to play with. And it's one of those things that the more different apps you've played with, the more functionality it has. And I'm just bringing it back up in front of me because I need to remind myself what options you have. But when you're in there, you immediately see this blank desktop. You can modify it. You can set color theme. You can set your wallpaper, those kind of things. You can have multiple virtual desktops. But along the bottom, there's a range of things. The interesting one for me, as a techie, is records, because if you click on records, it's got the classic kind of tubular, sliced tubes database kind of icon, and inside of that you will see all of the different apps in which ATProto apps in which have inserted data records into your database, and then you can click on those, and honestly, I can click on app.bluesky.feed.like and I will just see a range of like gobbledygook records, because those are all of the IDs of all of those things. But if you wanted to and you were a developer, you can get down to the raw JSON for each of the objects that you've liked, for example. This is the magic that Blue Sky is doing with their front end, what they call their app view. So they are putting all of this data into a meaningful thing that an average user would see. But you'll also see, in my case, that smoke signal app I mentioned, that calendar entry that was for that app that was, I'm going to look it up now, because it would be in here, where I RSVP'd, and I would have a domain, I would have a link to see that particular app to say I'd RSVP'd to that event. I can see my Anisota card game player stats, for example. So I can see I've got stamina of 98.4 and how long I played for last time and things like that. So I think that's fun. But as you look at the rest of this desktop, you've got a text pad. Now, this is interesting because, again, it's public data. It would take somebody going and interrogating my PDS to see what plain text records I'd written into it for it to be, risky for me to put something in there. But I created a text record or just a text file. And the idea is that I could sign into, I'm currently using my Mac, I can sign into my Linux laptop, which is in another part of my house later with the same ID, and I'd get all of this through this virtual data store. There's a calendar option, there's people, there's something called Deckard, which has got a unicorn icon, a bit of a Blade Runner theme there, but that's actually essentially a TweetDeck style view of Blue Sky. And you've also got Operator. Now, Blue Sky, the company, is famously very into AI and vibe coding, and they had a big outage yesterday as we record this, and they said no vibe coding was involved. But you can actually connect this to a local LLM if you want to on your physical machine to do stuff. So I'm going to stop there, but all I want to say is I think that this is technically interesting. I think that I share Michael Rowe's concerns about the public nature of the data. And I have a range of other concerns. For example, the fact that my data is in a European hosted organization data center, and I couldn't use Blue Sky yesterday because the front end was down. So it is not a decentralized system. And lots of these other apps were completely broken because the front end bit at Blue Sky was down, even though my data was elsewhere. So I think that there's a range of issues with this whole alternative open social web. I remain Camp Fediverse and Camp ActivityPub. That has a range of issues as well. Both of them are different to what people might be used to from the fully centralized, singular company-owned systems. But I just wanted to bring it to both of your attention and perhaps to our listeners' attention, because I find it interesting. And there's a gaming element here too, because you could directly store your achievements for any games that want to talk this protocol and to your data set in that one data center and take it with you, whether the company in the end exists or not. Assuming that apps still talk this protocol in the future, then that data is, long-term storage potential.
Well, or you can just create an interrogation function and say, parse it, ETL it, right? In theory.
I have some serious concerns about it as a alternative to ActivityPub. I prefer ActivityPub and Fediverse, but I just wanted to draw your attention to this because I think this is a really nice illustration of the potential for this done well.
I got excited and creeped out exactly at the same time for those same reasons, right? Because 100%. ActivityPub is an open standard. ATProto is a currently closed standard controlled by a single company that's trying to get it to be opened and owned by somebody else. To make this really powerful for me, because I don't use Blue Sky very much, I'd have to start hooking Blue Sky into a lot of my life, which I may or may not want to do.
I don't think you have to, though.
I have to. You log in with Blue Sky because I need that ATProto link to those other systems for it to pull it all together.
Yeah,
correct?
I think you're right. That it is ultimately another
closed garden.
Facebook, Meta, Google, single data store of you. Yeah. But this one is all open, right? So whereas Google has loads of data about you, whether you like it or not, and you probably use a bunch of apps, and we certainly, all three of us, use a lot of Apple stuff, and they've got loads of different views of us.
Yeah.
This makes it all public. So you can see exactly what that data looks like, and you can see, how you stored it, which app you were using to put it in there. And that transparency element is interesting. But
it's interesting for me, but again, like I said, both sides, right? I get it. And transparency, I think, is good, except when you don't want it to be transparent.
Yeah.
Well, it certainly makes it a lot easier too. Is part of the other challenge, right?
Now, it looks like somebody's been trying to hack my personal data store there, and the reason that won't work,
as we were talking,
is that you need to use so the records are pointing at my website, which isn't a thing, and
right.
You also would need to use the DID, which is associated underneath with my domain name. So so again, it is technical.
Yeah.
But yes, in principle, all that stuff is possible. We should wrap up by talking about some totally different things. So let's talk about some totally different things. Something fun.
I saw this week, and I can't remember where I saw it, but I love live concerts, and someone has released on archive.com a new archive of, I want to say it was 2,000 or so concerts, 10,000 shows, starting in 1984 to fairly current, MP3s that you can download the full concerts of bands you may know of, Nirvana, The Cure, Depeche Mode, bands that I like from the 80s, all the way to very current artists, all searchable, all indexed, full concert recordings. And I even found I think it was a 1988 or 89 Tracy Chapman live set in a little club that was just fantastic.
Well,
highly recommended.
I found something also musical.
Yes.
Which was to encourage Michael Martin to extend his Lego Smart Bricks collection.
Yeah, not for $750. Mm-mm.
What can you do if you buy £750 worth? So what's that, $1,000 worth of Lego Smart playsets?
Well, you can have a lot of fun, for sure.
You can put them all together as a Mos Eisley Cantina and play a giant Mos Eisley Cantina.
That was way cool.
There's a YouTube video associated with this one. You've got to watch it to figure it out. But it's what they refer to as a huge Lego karaoke machine, making use of the musical functionality in the Mos Eisley Cantina, and a load of switches that let the different minifigures pop up and sing along. So, we've been saying that the smart bricks are the future of Lego, and this is where it's all going.
There you go.
We're all going to pay that much more for Lego in the future, just so that we can have our own massive cantina.
Awesome.
Well, Andy, thank you for that tour. That was really, really cool. And I've been playing with some of the things already. I hope our listeners do too. If you see something cool, shoot us a note, drop us a line.
On Mastodon.
There you go.
We are
which will not show up in the ATProto.
Yeah.
And then we'll be sure to pick it up here again next time on gamesatwork.biz. See you, everybody.
You've been listening to gamesatwork.biz, the podcast about gaming technology and play. We are part of the Blueberry Podcasting Network, and would like to thank the band Random Encounters for their song, Big Blue. You can follow us at our website at gamesatwork.biz.